Update, still a major hurricane, a Category 3 storm. But there are some signs of some weakness occurring here within the storm. We're looking at the satellite image structure here, and the brighter the colors, the whites and pinks here, especially to the north of the storm center, indicating colder cloud tops, meaning higher thunderstorm structure there. That's a sign of a healthy hurricane. But notice it is not symmetric. There's a reason for that. There is some wind shear starting to kick in out of the south and west, and that's blowing the tops off those thunderstorms off to the north and northeast of that storm center, so that eventually could lead to a little bit of some weakening. Right now, it's just to the north and east of the Turks and Caicos, about 55 miles from that storm center there. They were hit pretty badly with Hurricane Irma just a few short weeks ago. Spared a direct hit here with Maria, but it is within the range, the radius of the hurricane force winds, which this morning were stretching out about 70 miles from the center of that storm. So probably still some issues really going on there with the structures that are still standing. All right, here's the cone structure over the last couple of hours, or the wind radii, I should say. What you're looking at here in that red shading is the area that you'll probably find hurricane force winds. Again, this is a computer model here sampling, indicating those winds sustained 74 miles an hour or greater. This orange shading is hurricane wind gusts, gusting up to 74 miles per hour. And the outermost circle here, tropical storm force winds in excess of 39 miles per hour sustained. It is gradually lifting on off towards the north, and as we let it play out here and you watch it travel northwards over the next couple days and through the weekend, you'll start to see that center circle start to shrink in size as the storm is forecast to gradually weaken as it moves over an area of water in the ocean that's a little bit cooler. There's a reason for that that's pretty interesting here that we'll talk about right now. The first of which is how active the season has been. A lot of traffic out there in the Atlantic. 3 separate major hurricanes traveling within this general area. We had Jose, which is still a storm up to the north, Hurricane Irma, and then most recently Hurricane Maria. And what I have plotted here is the track, the historical track from Irma that actually intersects with Maria in the last 24 hours. So the waters there, a lot of the energy has already been used up. What happens when these storms move over an area, they leave an imprint on their environment. And in this particular case, they sucked a lot of energy in terms of warm ocean waters out of the sea surface there. There wasn't enough time between now, 2 weeks ago, and now for that heat to be replenished by the environment there. So the water's still remaining quite cool despite it being 2 weeks later. But it is now north of that intersection and that path crossing there. So it's up and over an area where it's going to go for about another 24 hours and start to strengthen a little bit more. The water content here, or the heat energy, is untapped. There haven't been any storms tracking through this particular area of the Atlantic. But look what happens as we get farther north in that forecast period. It is forecast to track within Hurricane Jose's wake, so intersecting 2 separate storms within the past 3 weeks in this area. So a lot of this energy has already been used up by Jose as well, which is why you see this number going down to a 2 and then eventually to a Category 1 hurricane as it moves farther north into the Atlantic. There's Jose, still a storm, although post-tropical, a little bit of a status change there. What this really means is it's taken on more of the structure of a nor'easter or mid-latitude type storm that you'd normally see. There's fronts associated with this now. It doesn't draw its energy solely off the ocean, more of temperature interaction here. And it does retain winds, sustained winds of at least tropical storm force. In fact, Hurricane Center says it's still got sustained winds of around 50 miles per hour as of the latest advisory. In fact, it's just been dropped down to 45 miles per hour, so just barely above that 39 mile per hour fresh threshold. It's expected to stay in that general area, and the overall pattern here is going to be one that favors a track to Maria heading on out to sea. I'll show you why. This is what you're looking at here. The jet stream and upper level winds. This is the prime steering mechanism for storms. They're going to always track along the area of least resistance. And right now, there's very little resistance. So that's why it's going to kind of meander in that same general area like Jose has been doing for the past 5 days now. But there is a strong trough that's going to develop in the middle parts of the country and gradually push its way eastwards as a ridge of high pressure breaks down over the middle Atlantic. So this is going to eventually sweep up and absorb Maria and push it out to sea before it can have any major impacts on the eastern seaboard as it's presenting itself right now. So that's some good news. So here's the official track from the National Hurricane Center. Category 3 storm, major hurricane with winds of 125 miles per hour. As it travels north in that area of untapped energy like we talked about, it maintains that Category 3 before it hits that intersection with Jose's track. Then it starts to weaken under the areas of some slightly cooler ocean water. Also, the wind shear will kick up a little bit more by the time we get to Sunday and Monday, and down to a Category 1 hurricane by the time it makes it to some general area within from Wilmington all the way to Bermuda, somewhere in the Atlantic there. That cone of uncertainty grows quite large at that point in the forecast period. But the area after that forecast cone ends, this area here looks to be the most likely path of where it ends up by, say, Tuesday and Wednesday. Very slight chance of it edging its way back towards the eastern seaboard, and also a slight chance of it getting a little bit farther to the east. They are all gauging on how strong that trough is that comes in and sweeps it out. Also want to remind you here that that cone of uncertainty certainly is not set in stone. The storm center is forecast to track within that cone. So Maria is a rather large storm, 350 to 400 miles wide. So the center of it could track right in the middle of that forecast cone and still have impacts on the eastern seaboard. Now, if it tracks on the farthest eastern section of that cone, more of an issue for Bermuda. If it travels a little bit farther along that western fringe, certainly more of an issue for the eastern seaboard of the United States. So we'll have to watch that closely. Even though that cone of uncertainty doesn't encompass any land areas, still is subject to change. All right, let's look at what the models are thinking here. This is the GFS ensemble. One model run 20 different times with just different initial settings, ever so slightly different. And pretty good consensus here all the way up to around, say, Sunday and Monday. And then it runs into that interaction with that trough sweeping on in, that jet stream, that North Atlantic jet that'll pick it up and push it off towards the north and east and eventually absorb that energy there. As you can certainly see, the GFS is indicating that. Now, the other hurricane models, similar idea here, a very strong consensus northbound over the next 48 to 72 hours, and then things get a little bit iffy here, starting to indicate that trajectory off to the north and east as well.